Boom.
What is up, everybody? Solomon here. Super excited to be with Genfinity. It is an early morning for us here, but diving into multitude of ecosystems and projects across Web3. Today, we're going to be tackling the Constellation ecosystem, and we have new head of marketing and socials within the Stardust collective, so kind of the community and governance arm within the ecosystem, Dagnam PI. Dagnam, I always like to start these out with an intro and an overview. If you could maybe just give us a little bit of a background of yourself, your history within the ecosystem, that'd be really cool.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah, so most of the people online know me as Dagnam, and my history with the community in general goes all the way back to before actually anybody in the community knew about me. There was somebody that I work with that was super into crypto. I was super into stocks and was always telling people about up and coming technologies, things to focus on. And one of the things that I was telling people about was Palantir. So this was before they IPO'd. And Palantir was a company that had been on my radar for a long time. And I was just waiting for them to IPO. And this guy was like, okay, if you really like that stuff, wait till you see what these guys are doing. And he didn't even really shill me on it. He just broadly said, you know, they're having a secure internet connection. And I was like, whoa. So then I looked up online and I looked at all the white papers. I watched all the videos and my mind was completely blown. And then I went to the chart and I looked at the chart and I saw that it was basically at the bottom. And I was like, okay, this is a no-brainer. The risk here is pretty much zero. So then I wanted to see what people were talking online, like socially about it. And there really wasn't much engagement going on socially, which I thought was super weird because if they were able to do everything that they were doing with the government, but do this in a big public setting, I was like, this is going to change everything. And then so that was the genesis, if you will, of Dagnam.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that you announced, I mean, this space is pretty much, we want to be tackling your announcement here. So, you know, can you look at, I guess what I'm kind of considering is like, you've been in this ecosystem for so long, obviously, you know, having kind of awareness of Stardust Collective and everything else, like where do you feel like you are going to add kind of the value necessary to kind of drive the ecosystem forward, recognition forward, things like that to get community involved? I'm sure that's going to be a big part of your kind of role within Stardust. But I would love your thoughts on like some of the things. And I have seen, I mean, by the way, just looking at like even the X account, like you're pushing out, so, you know, consistent content, things like that. But how do you feel like you're really going to kind of contribute to move the needle for the ecosystem, I guess would be the question that I would have.
I guess one of my strengths is seeing the big picture, right? Like being able to put all the pieces together and seeing how everything connects and being able to essentially peek around the corner, right? And some people, they just look at surface value of things, right? And don't understand how everything can scale out. The alpaca token is a perfect example. You know, I was talking about this functionality years before it was implemented. Just yesterday, I made a post about this and I brought it up. So I made a post in 2021 and I tagged Raoul Pal, right? And, you know, I said, look, imagine if you were able to tag somebody on Twitter. It was called Twitter back then. And just being able to like send somebody a token. And now with this alpaca metagraph, you actually have that ability because you're getting APIs from multiple data sources. So you can actually reward people for engagement, right? And, you know, it's these types of things that some people can't really see the broader context of what's going to happen. And that's actually been one of my skills, I guess.
I think it's interesting. So, I mean, I guess to put some context around it for people, uh, Constellation Network has application-specific networks built on top of the hypergraph, right? So the hypergraph you could consider as like the base layer, and then you've got these application specific networks that essentially operate as like unique layer ones with custom data logic that they can kind of take in. It's not like a rip and replace mindset like traditional businesses can bring in custom logic. And then you think about why you would have these kind of application specific networks on top. And I thought it was pretty interesting when you think about something like, so the first metagraph that went live, obviously Door, and then you've got this, Alpaca, which is an interesting move, but like one of the biggest pain points across Web3, and we hear this all the time, is like these high utility driven ecosystems. And like, it's always like a builder support type issue almost. And like, what is meaningful community engagement? And when I kind of look at something like that, and it's like, if you can kind of somehow measure through like actual data, the most engaging people within a community or the most educated people within an ecosystem that are consistently showing up, that are consistently like doing due diligence on whatever it may be that's going on within the network, then you have new projects launching, like metagraphs, application specific networks, whatever it may be. What a valuable tool that would be to actually be able to be like, okay, we want to either reward community, we want to be engaged with some of the most active members and get them involved in our community as we launch our project. How do we do that? How do we filter? Because you and I both know that Twitter and X is a minefield of nonsense. There's so much fake stuff out there, but maybe talk a little bit about how you kind of envision that, like the meaningful of like participation based data.
Right. So again, so this alpaca token is a perfect example, and I was kind of going deep into the woods about this specific use case just yesterday with Mr. Powell. Where he didn't really get it, and I applied this to an application that's actually built on Solana, this teleport app, which is a pretty novel app. Right. It's a really great use case for using ride sharing. Right. But one of the things that they've failed, in my opinion, to do is how to generate new users and how to engage people. And so how you can do that, how you can onboard new people really rapidly, is by just mass blasting everybody these like rideshare tokens. Be like, okay, we can give you 1,000 free miles just by signing up to the app, and bam. Or you and I are both in the South. There's a big chain down here in the South, and I think they're up. The East Coast a little bit. They're in 17 states. Zaxby's Chicken, right? They're all over the place. There's 900 locations, 17 states, right? So you could even have something like that where it's like, go to Zaxby's in the next 10 minutes and you can get this meal deal for free, right? And you heard about it from me and you're like, bro, I'm here in line. I've never been in this place. You talk about it all the time. I don't have any Zaxby's, right? And I'm like, bro, I got you. Get out your wallet, right? And so I can send you the free Zaxby's tokens, right? So we'll do this live right now. I'm going to send you one token, right? So here we go. And I'm going to submit, confirm, and then bam. So there you go. And then you're standing in line at the Zaxby's wanting to get this free promotional deal, but you don't have any Pollo tokens or whatever they're going to call them. And you open up your wallet, and then bam, you've got all the Zaxby tokens. But you could even expand it out even more than that, right? You could trade your Pollo tokens maybe for Delta airline miles, right? So you have these micro transactions, like true interoperability between stuff. And it's this type of application that isn't even achievable right now on any other network.
What I think
you
is
can't.
really, go ahead.
Yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead.
What
No,
I
go
think is
ahead.
really cool, and by the way, it's my Zaxby token has arrived. But what I think is really cool is like, you know, you get into the weeds with like the things that we see on X right now. I mean, like even you, for example, like I always think it's interesting, like when you look across the space and like, you know, community is the most empowering thing any ecosystem can have, period. And I fervently believe that community are the ones that primarily have been moving the needle for years in this space. I mean, we could argue that in certain contexts or whatever, but one of the things I think is interesting that happens is when you see kind of people get frustrated in communities being like, oh, well, what about this? I mean, there's this integration and, you know, this should be at an X, whatever it may be. And like, this needs to be like, it's so everything's so undervalued. This ecosystem's so undervalued. But then it's like, I've always got to ask myself like, okay, well, what are you doing to go out there and try to move the needle? And then I hear stories like that, where you're like actually responding to people in a chat to be like, hey, you know, you can have the best technology in the world, but if people don't know about it, nobody's going to use it. Right. So, I mean, actually getting out there and doing some of the groundwork, but then being able to go in obviously in the future, like when I look at the new metagraph that is surrounding itself around participation and activity and education, all these things, like imagine going in and having that conversation and then looking like somehow having that connected to the hypergraph and like being like, oh, I got, you know, participation based aspects, like based on engaging with some other person to educate them about the technology, things like that. You know, that I think is crazy interesting.
Yeah. And you can, there's so many different ways that you can expand on this. Like you can leverage your engagement with your own community. So like influencers could use this, right? For greater participation. I mean, there's so many ways that this can scale out that people are really underestimating everything, you know, and it goes back to like that conversation that I was having with Raul Pal, right? Which kind of blows my mind. He was, you know, stuck on the chart, right? He's like, you know, he tried to dunk on the network a little bit. He's like, okay, compare the chart to Solana. And it's like, bro, like, look at what just happened with the open network. You know, last year, nobody was even focused on TON, right? It wasn't even on anybody's radar. But meanwhile, they were leveraging their own community, which has a huge advantage over Solana. You know, that whole ecosystem is based around Telegram. Telegram already has almost 1 billion users. Most of those people are Web 2. They don't know anything about crypto. And so that's genius. And then they flip this switch and they have this games, right? And that's engaging people to do this, but it's all using blockchain, right? And then all of a sudden now, look, you wake up and they're in the top 10 and people are trying to figure out like what happened. And what I'm saying is that same network effect is absolutely possible on Constellation's network because these metagraphs have that same scalability. And not only that, but they have complete custom, like the networks are completely customizable. And, you know, it has the backing from the federal government, right? So it's already been battle tested by the government.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, and, you know, you bring up Solana, which is an interesting point too. Like, I also feel like one of the big pain points with some of these, like, let's say utility or enterprise or even government driven like ecosystems historically has been not meeting community where they're at. So like when you bring up Solana, there's an interesting example because yesterday, or maybe it was yesterday or the day before, they had that Blinks announcement or whatever it was, basically saying that you can integrate anything across where users are already at. This is kind of a similar aspect, I think, for like the Constellation ecosystem where you can meet users where they're at. A lot of users are on X right now, doing things on X right now, and then you can directly kind of attach it back into the network in meaningful ways. So I'm interested to kind of watch where something like a community engagement type Metagraph that kind of manages data, and like you said, isn't just static with some Turing complete smart contract that just exists as is forever, because the whole point of this space is innovation never stops. So as community engagement, adapts, and as technology adapts, you have the ability to customize and adapt the Metagraph on top of that. You mentioned federal and DoD too. I mean, I think that's kind of really been interesting to watch. I don't know how deep into the weeds with some of the stuff that we can get, but maybe just at a high level, I don't think a lot of people know. And obviously we'll just talk about the tech aspects here. I think it's interesting when you look at some of the things that Constellation's been able to achieve over the past handful of years. I want to say like 5 years, like 4 or 5 years, like with the federal stuff. And we know how slow moving some of these entities are, but the ways that the government, the DoD, even supply chain, things like that within the DoD, like would leverage data to make sure that there's provenance there, to make sure that it's streamlined, it's fast, that there's no. What are your thoughts around some of the DoD stuff, I guess I should say?
Yeah, I mean, so the DoD and enterprise is kind of where my main focus has been for the past couple of years, because that's like where this base foundational layer is going to be built upon, right? This is how they've been able to draw in people like IBM and Microsoft, right? So the average DGen is like, or even like Raoul Pal, right? Be like, look at the chart, bro. And it's like, no, you don't get it. Like, this network can capture any data from any source and validate it in real time on chain, and it can scale horizontally, almost indefinitely, right? And it's that reason why this is going to gain mass adoption. And with federal specifically, like, they were able to prove that. So they started off their partnership with the federal government, more specifically a branch of the federal government called US Transcom. So it's the transportation thing for the whole entire Department of Defense, right? So they move logistics stuff everywhere. Like, if they need rapid deployments, they send out their fleets. But then there's a subgroup of US Transcom called the Civil Reserve Air Fleet, or CRAF. And that's where they're able to mobilize like the civilian air fleet. So we're talking about American Airlines, Delta, United, FedEx, UPS, all those people. And so they sort of bid on these contracts, because sometimes maybe there's a special operations where they have to be low key about and swoop in somewhere. You're not going to do that on a big US Air Force jet, right? But you could maybe sneak in there on a UPS freighter, right? Because UPS goes into a lot of these countries all the time. And so it was a way for them to prove that they could secure and manage this auction, essentially. And they did that.
Yeah, I think I kind of want to move to, like you mentioned, which we've been, obviously we work with the Constellation ecosystem, media partners, everything else, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily understand. Like, I don't have the light bulb moment immediately a lot of the times. It like takes a lot of time to kind of learn about what's built already and what's kind of being built. And I think it's interesting looking at something like the government type stuff, and then to take it a step further, almost looking at that as like an MVP of sorts, if that makes any sense, where like you can prove out technology in certain regards, and the capabilities of the technology. And then you kind of look at, and I'm curious your opinion on where this goes, because we know metagraphs, like the application specific networks, kind of like the layer ones in the ecosystem. Literally, I think that was October or November of last year. First metagraph went live with Door. We see, implications. Obviously, the second one, there's obviously a lot of projects and integration net right now. But if you combine something like metagraphs and the generative economics and snapshots and the decks and the bridges and stuff like that coming together, I always look at it as a way where like the way that people look at the Constellation ecosystem right now is probably going to be vastly different than the way that people look at the Constellation ecosystem a year from now. What are your kind of thoughts on all this stuff converging together at kind of this same time?
Yeah. So what I've been trying to tell people since about late November, when everybody first got wind of the National DigiFoundry, is if you really want a window into the future of Constellation Network, just look at the National DigiFoundry. So that also is a DAO built on Constellation's network in conjunction with using IBM's cloud infrastructure, and Microsoft is also involved, right? But if you look at all the people that are involved, so essentially, the DigiFoundry is like an incubator program. And so it's a collaborative effort between federal and enterprise people, and they're working on ways on how to implement digital assets. And so there's these different working groups. They've got a space working group. They've got a secure information working group. They've got an education working group. And you can see how all of this is going to play out and who actually is involved in this. And all of these people have a stake in this. They're actually using blockchain right now. So that, to me, is the clearest indication of what's going to happen with this, because it's only a matter of time before, and I said this for many times, it's only a matter of time before one of these things goes public. And it was just a couple of weeks ago where there was that big announcement with Forward Edge AI, which is another company that you can go super deep into the woods. I mean, it's a company that most people have never even heard of, Forward Edge AI. But if you just do a deep dive into that company alone, I mean, you can spend hours there. And I kind of hit on that company a little bit when it was first announced that there was 3 different cities in Texas that are working on tokenization of assets. So you've got Fort Worth, Dallas, and Austin, I think, are all working on building out metagraphs. So,
yeah, I had the opportunity to interview the FWTX guy, and that's pretty interesting too. It's almost like civil education and civil technology type aspects, how this is going to affect like the municipal level of like government and things like that, which is crazy because I know we talk a lot about like enterprise adoption and national government and national adoption, all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's going to be a trickle down effect within the lowest levels of society at some point in time with the way that this technology kind of interacts with everything. I was interested looking at, and shout out to Kevin Jackson from Forward Edge AI, and obviously one of the individuals responsible for spearheading the initiative stuff. But this is something that I've heard from a couple of different people. So we've had the opportunity to interview, and I know Constellation's a member as well. I'm going to forget it, but the Capitol Hill guys, Chamber of Digital, DCC,
Digital Chamber or whatever. Yeah.
Digital Chamber of Commerce. Yeah. And one of the things that I don't remember if it was Alex or Cody said when we were doing interviews is you have to understand the way that like government thinks when they're trying to push legislation through. There's essentially like bureaucrats sitting at the top of these panels, whether it's a banking panel or whatever it is. And it's like, what matters to the US? What's going to directly affect the US as far as adopting this technology? And I don't think that we think about that a lot. Like we think about remittances and stuff like that, but that affects people, but is that a direct pull for the government to be like, oh, let's push meaningful legislation through? And then you look at something like NDF where you have direct participation and representation from individuals within the government that are kind of working hand in hand to test out areas like DAO and tokenization and all these different things. And I'm interested to look at some of the use cases like climate change disaster, refugee management, DeSci, decentralized science, space working group, secure information sharing, which think about how many times how long we've been in blockchain, dude. How many times do you hear about secure information sharing as being like a huge use case? I mean, it obviously is. but I'm interested to look at what these guys are kind of
Well, I
working
mean,
on
just
behind the
look at
scenes.
how many networks have been hacked lately, right? Or even cities. I mean, we had what last year? Some was it in Pennsylvania? Some water district was hacked, and the federal government is super serious about it. And there's a reason why they pushed out that Defense Authorization Act, which actually in December I talked about. And I read through that document. It's like 2,000 words, and I highlighted some things that were completely applicable to what Constellation is providing. And I'm like, look, you you guys really need to start paying attention, because here it is. There's literally billions of dollars on the table. There's it was signed into law. A lot of these agencies have 180 days from when that was signed to start proving out that they have solutions to these problems that was signed and authorized into law. And I said, look, it's only going to the clock started ticking in December. And then what did we have? Boom. That interview that you gave at Consensus, where Diggles announced that they just secured another contract with the government. And
Yeah,
so,
it's hard to get. I've done a lot of these interviews. It's always difficult to get Mr. Diggles on a space. I know he's kind of the federal arm, well, in charge of the federal arm of all the initiatives. I did want to give a shout out just quickly. We talked about projects and integration, but there are a lot of great builders in the Constellation ecosystem, and I told Court that I would give him a shout out with Intrana and the Chupacabra. So I'm drinking my El Chupacabra coffee cup this morning, and even to see so I think one of the things that's interesting to me with something like Metagraphs, like with the code bases and like being able to inject in custom code logic and stuff like that, is like not only the ways that potentially and I'm curious your opinion on this, interacts with traditional businesses as they want to come on chain in the future, or on the hypergraph in the future, but the interesting things that you could do to kind of bring different aspects of different networks into Constellation as well. Where the Intrana guys, as an example, we're leveraging SAT-P, obviously a quant network initiative, but then aspects of Constellation too, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, they're a perfect example and use case to talk about, especially with this federal stuff, right? So they're one of the chairs of the financial product tokenization working group in the DigiFoundry. And guess who else is in there? The U.S. Treasury Department. So you've got Intrana sitting at the same table as the U.S. Treasury Department. And as somebody that's covering the broader aspects of tokenization, I mean, you know what's happening with the MiCA stuff, right? So Tether's getting shut down, and I've been telling people for a long time, you are absolutely kidding yourself if you think any government, just forget about the United States, for example, if you think any government is going to let a private company run their stable coins. That is not happening, at period. So now you have people like the world's largest economy, the United States, and the world's largest data producer, the Department of Defense, working with Constellation on ways to tokenize stuff. And you've got these guys in Trana that are going to have this bridge connector between Quant and Constellation. And what they have done is truly revolutionary. One of the holdbacks to mass adoption is an easy integration. So Quant, as you know, has a great tool set, but unless you're a developer, it's kind of complex, right? And a lot of these small to medium-sized businesses don't have the tech experience or don't even have the funds to hire a right developer to integrate all of Quant's tooling. So what these guys have done is they're building a network where you don't even have to worry about it. It's just plug and play. The Quant stuff works in the background. You just set it and forget it. Yeah.
And I think obviously like interoperability from the quant standpoint deals through Overledger. So this, I kind of want to get a little bit into. There was I think a snapshot fee light paper that Constellation came up with, and this is kind of dealing in like the generative economics aspect, where as real business, it's in broad strokes, as real businesses start coming on and to the hypergraph and building out a metagraph, whatever it is, it kind of allows them to scale with the demands that they have from a data standpoint. And there was like numbers around, and I forget the amount of transactions, but it was saying if you had this amount of data, and it was the same amount of data across different networks. And if you look at Ethereum, and I know Ethereum's trying to deal with the scalability issue consistently and always, nothing against Ethereum, but if there's just actual numbers, and I think per transaction cost, there's a number there, but then it says monthly cost, and this is all the same amount of data, 50 million, and this was from back in like October, November, $50,909,130. Monthly cost on Constellation would be about $3,834 at that time. Hedera would have been right around 5K. Solana would have been right around 7K. And I've seen similar statistics, like which is interesting. Like I know like ordinals, for example, has been really big over, in 2023 especially. And I don't know if you knew this. It's like an interesting stat I found. And I don't have a Constellation stat if you were to inscribe stuff directly on the hypergraph, or if that's even possible. But 3.1 gigabytes of data inscribed on ordinals. Like if you were to do 3.1 gigabytes of data, it ended up being like millions and millions of dollars. And if you look at a high utility network, I think there was a stat on like Hedera, it was like a couple grand. And I'm assuming there's similar aspects there, but it's always wild to look at. Like, I'm a fervent believer that over time, there's kind of this patchwork of interoperability that occurs. Different networks are plugged in for different things. Is that your thought process too, as far as interoperability? Or do you think that there's going to be like almost like synthetic representations of networks existing on other networks over time?
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I think that you're going to have different components of different networks all working in conjunction. To go back to Solana, yesterday, I think it was yesterday or maybe the day before that, like I was pointing out to that teleport app, and I'm like, look, you guys can still use Solana for your NFT stuff. What I'm saying is you can also scale out different aspects of your network on Constellation's metagraphs because they're a microservice, and you could onboard new users with this token stuff. I mean, that's how you can do it. And this isn't just like a one chain's going to rule them all. I mean, you've got Entrana working with Quant, right? And so that's how I think that this is going to evolve. And then, expanding on that a little bit more, like with the snapshot fees, I tried to make a post when I was at the airport, and I was telling Ben, I was like, man, I can't believe it got cut off, but like the whole intro to my little video that I was giving got cut off. I mean, one of the biggest incentives for a developer or any company to build on this network isn't really the fact that it's interoperable with any existing systems, so you don't have to, as you were saying, rip and replace anything, or the fact that you can directly connect any integrated device. So you got a smart fridge, you got your doorbell camera, you've got a Wi-Fi toaster, or your car, right? You can just plug in anything and instantly tokenize it. No, where I think the biggest value proposition for these people, companies or just developers in general, is the fact that you can become a validator on your network from day one. So you could start earning ROI immediately. And with these snapshot fees, you can incentivize users to stake on your network, right? So that would even lower the fees. So you've already pointed out that the fees are already lower than Hedera. They're already lower than Solana, and they're infinitely lower than Ethereum, right? But you could even lower them even more than that by attracting users to stake on your network. There's that whole fee calculator that they have out there. Because all DAG is bandwidth. And so the more people that stake on your church's chicken metagraph, for example, the cheaper it's going to be for you to run your network.
I think it's been interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. That's it. I mean,
I think it has been interesting to watch. And it seems like it's more of maybe a little bit of a slow burn, but like it's been interesting to watch collaboration in blockchain and Web3, because I remember back in 2018, 2019, we didn't really see this at all. I remember in 2020, 2021, we didn't see very much of this at all. And I think we're starting to see inklings of some of these networks starting to come together for open standards initiatives to kind of make user experience more seamless. Obviously, DREC stemming out of Hedera, then Algorand comes on, and then you see, Ripple and Constellation and Casper and XRPL Labs, and that I think has been interesting to watch. I mean, I'm not sure what your opinion is on it, but like I guess I'll give you my thought process. I think that that's occurring because you have networks that actually have a foundation that has been built over a handful of years, where now it makes sense to start reaching out and collaborating with other networks, where newer networks that are launching, let's say this year, it doesn't really make sense for them to do that because they're still kind of scaling out their own internal ecosystem or proving out their own internal technology and getting everything to a place where it needs to be. I guarantee you a few years, networks that are launching this year are doing similar things to what we're seeing within like DREC, with like Hedera, Constellation, Ripple, Algorand, all these people. It's almost just like, how developed are some of these networks? Like at what point in their life cycle are they at, I guess is my opinion on it.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the tribalism really isn't going to get you anywhere. All that's going to do is silo yourself. And so the DREC stuff is a perfect example of how by joining forces and collaborating, you can not only help push the adoption of blockchain in general, which is what we all want, right? But it can also elevate your own network. An example of something that I've been doing behind the scenes with a new company that I just ran across a couple of months ago. It's this company called Conduit. And so they have this crazy technology. They have hardware that's actually NIST rated. And essentially, it allows anybody, you or me, to become your own decentralized server, right? So you don't need Amazon. You don't need Google Cloud, right? You can literally run an entire server infrastructure from your house, right? So that's going to usher in like true decentralization of the internet.
And this, so that people know, is National Institute of Standards and Technology, right? We'll drop some terms on people while we're doing these. I know you and I have seen these organizations before.
Yeah, there's acronyms everywhere, all over the place. But yeah, I mean, this is like this is crazy stuff. These little enclaves that they're having, right? It's completely secure, military grade hardware. The CTO, I believe, was a former admiral in the Navy. He worked at NSA. This stuff all works. And once you see, applications come online, like the way that I sort of was envisioning a possibility is like, okay, so I have a node from Constellation. So I'm one of the validators on the network, but I use a cloud provider. So what if I can take their hardware and instead of running it on a centralized cloud provider, what if I just ran that in my house? making it truly decentralized. So it would be one of the only nodes actually on the network that is truly decentralized. There's several people on the network that are running it out of their house, but it's kind of complicated how to set that up. And these guys have uncomplicated it. It's just like a little unit that sits in your house.
I think it's interesting because like you talk about not siloing yourself, and even if you like fervently believe in like, you know, one ecosystem or three or four or however many ecosystems you believe in, if you're not getting out there and understanding what's going on with all the other ecosystems, how can you actually really support your one ecosystem is like what I think is, and I don't think a lot of people realize that, but there's way too much. I guess I'll put it this way. There's way too much innovation occurring right now across this entire industry. But luckily, like if you pay attention and try to get out there and learn about it, the industry's not too big where it's impossible to figure out the things that are like moving the needle for the ecosystems that you maybe care about like internally. So it's like there's so much out there, there's so much innovation, but it's still kind of easy to navigate. Like if you're actually making yourself a little bit uncomfortable, going out, learning about what other ecosystems are doing, and then figuring out ways that might interact with your ecosystem. And you're bringing up multiple examples of that, where it's like you're going out into the weeds and finding like interesting technology primitives that like make the user experience more seamless, or could be a potential fit, obviously, for the Constellation network, which is part of your job at this point in time. So
yeah, no, but you're right. But it's something that even before this was, you know, my job, you know, it was something that I was been trying to do for a while. So, you know, for about a year and a half, I've been trying to, you know, get together Dfinity, Internet Computer, and Constellation, because I really love what those guys are doing, right? And their network is a little bit more mature from the public standpoint, but there's lots of ways that this could work together. And you know, I really want to explore that. I made a couple posts the other day about this upcoming hackathon that's coming up. I mean, we can't really get into too much information about the hackathon, but I really encourage other communities like Internet Computer or like the Open Network to participate in this hackathon, right? Because this is how we're going to drive forward adoption, right? Is through collaborative effort. And somebody is going to make a killer app. And it could be somebody from Dfinity. They could make the next viral app, right? That everybody has to have. You know, the possibilities here are sort of endless with what you can do when multiple networks are combining their strengths together, right? So you could just make some sort of super app.
Well, I know you mentioned the hackathon. We probably can't get too into the weeds, but I know I'm pretty sure that it's coming up beginning or middle of July. I want to say like July 15th timeframe. So I'm sure that you'll start to see some stuff. I know that Genfinity will be starting to post some stuff about this hackathon. I'm sure Constellation will be posting stuff about the hackathon as well. I want to ask you because I know that community, like you're deeply embedded into the Constellation community as well. Like I try to pay attention to as many different like Telegram chats and stuff like that as I possibly can, and I see you pretty much everywhere. What's been the community response with you coming on board within Stardust Collective?
Overall, I mean, I think the sentiment is pretty high. You know, because for the past 2 years or so, you know, I've just been out there every single day, you know, rallying the troops, energizing people, you know, making sure that, you know, through the bear, we don't lose focus of what these guys are doing. And you know, I'm really glad and I'm really thankful for the opportunity that was given to me with this, to kind of give people insight actually into how this even happened. Several months ago, Ben actually reached out to me and was wanting to know if I was maybe wanting to do this from their side. And so I was putting together like a proposal of like how I would do this and how the network in general could benefit from it. And so as I was looking at other ecosystems and what they were doing, I came back to them and I said, actually, it would be better for everybody if I actually did this from the Stardust Collective side, from the community side. And so in order to do that, so Stardust Collective is a DAO. And so it would take a vote. And so to answer your question, is there support from the community of me doing this? I think that is proof that there's support, because the community voted me into this position. And I'm really blessed to have this opportunity. And I'm a part of some amazing people on the Stardust Collective. And, together we're going to be doing some amazing, it's going to be a wild summer. I mean, that's all I can say, really.
I know that,
but already the collective has done some amazing things with their the grants, right? So Intrana got a grant, Finovant got a grant, Cyberlead got a grant. We're just giving out grants to everybody. So if you want to build an application on this network, apply for a grant. And if your idea is good, yeah, we would love to expand this community.
I see. Well, I know, I guess first, you guys are doing the official kickoff space. And by the way, this is the earliest space I think that I've ever, out of all the audio, like hundreds of audio spaces, and then we just started these video ones. This is the earliest one we've ever done. So again, I'm going to shout out Intrana with the Chupacabra coffee cup here, because I am on my third cup of coffee right now. But you've also got Barry coming on with you. I think that you have Alex, who's a CTO of Constellation. Was it Art Siebold, or did I see Alan joining? Tell me a little bit about the space going on July 1st.
Yeah, Alan. So he's an advisor with just a deep, rich history. Coca-Cola, H&M, Procter and Gamble. I mean, just that alone, right, should get everybody pumped up to this space. Yeah. So we got the CTO, Alex Brandes, coming on. We've got Alan, Constellation advisor. We also have Lunar Crush is joining. I mean, that's huge. I mean, even if it was just Lunar Crush. And then we've got Joshua Jake. He's been a longtime supporter. I think a lot of people know who he is. He's all over X. He's big on TikTok too. Yeah, it's going to be a great space. Oh, and we have Dr. Martin Hosbeck too, part of Uphold. Right. So, I mean, we've got a pretty good lineup. Plus, we're going to have lots of people from the ecosystem, lots of metagraphs coming up talking. And we're just going to give everybody a rundown of everything that we've done and what we're doing now, and like what's around the corner. It's going to be a great space, and it'll be good for everybody who's actually new to the ecosystem to get educated on everything that's going on.
I think, and I'm just curious your thoughts on this too, because obviously Stardust has done a lot of great stuff, and will continue to with you. I know you're very aware of the importance of like consistency, as far as like making sure that you're posting at a consistent level, that you're kind of engaging with community, you're doing certain things. I'm sure that that's probably the way that you grew your own account. What do you envision with, the Stardust account? I was looking down through the tweets, and like, it's always cool to like look down through tweets where like, it doesn't feel like there's just like this entity that's like sitting above everything being like, we're doing this and blah, 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 blah. Like, I feel like it's cool for me to scroll down through a Twitter or X page and actually like see serious posts, but then also like laugh at a couple of posts and stuff like that. But what's your thought process on the way that, you know, the socials through Stardust will be kind of ran moving forward?
Well, so that was one of the other reasons why I was telling them that it was probably a better idea for me to do it from this account, because, you know, as a token issuer, you know, Constellation can't talk about a lot, about a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
But from the community aspect, we're actually freer to discuss almost anything, right? But you want to do it in a meaningful way. And it is kind of new for me to sort of navigate that, like between my personal account and then this Stargazer account. It's still kind of like blowing my mind a little bit, like having these two different personalities, so to speak.
I find it
But
pretty
already that account has already grown just in the past not even week that I've been posting from it.
Yeah. I find it interesting, and I've noticed this like over I don't know, over the journey of trying to do all the cross chain stuff consistently and everything else. But I always really do find it interesting when I see like, oh, you know, there's somebody from Luxo and there's somebody from wherever, and it's like really cool to kind of see the carryover. And sometimes I feel like that's like an intangible thing that happens by trying to do cross chain stuff and everything else. But like I know for you, for example, like with the Genfinity stuff, doing a lot of kind of crossover between like Hedera and Constellation. Like I know that you've kind of dove into the weeds with that stuff as well. But let me ask, I guess, as we kind of move out, I want to make sure that we didn't forget anything here. Oh, real quick. As far as like the grant aspects through Stardust and stuff, I think that that's an interesting subject, just because of the fact that like I know that this is one of the big things that Ben has and the team have really kind of tried to lay eyes on. Like you look across the Web3 industry, and there's obviously like these governing bodies and stuff like that that kind of operate with these grants, and they're not really attached into the community in certain regards, and there's sometimes frustration in X, Y, and Z. But like how are you guys tackling it differently? Because you mentioned it's obviously community, the DAO aspects. As you see more builders starting to reach out, the hackathon is a perfect example. You're going to probably have an influx of people that are submitting projects or code bases into the hypergraph, like things that interact. Like how are you going to support those builders? How does Stardust really kind of thrive? I think that I'll put it this way, I'm rambling because it's early, but I think it's interesting that you have that community level engagement with projects looking to build in the ecosystem, and not just kind of this body that sits on top of it that's like making decisions that the community can't necessarily see.
Yeah, so one of the great things about Stardust is we have members from multiple facets. So we've got some people that have some development experience. We've got some people that have some marketing experience. We've got some people that have, financial experience. We've got some people like Barry. I think we're going to touch on this together on the space, that have like business development experience, right? And so that's what that's where we can really help scale this out, and maybe help projects that are looking for funding on how they can improve, and then also sort of vet people, because you don't just want to just give away money to everybody, right? It's like, oh, you get a grant, you get a grant, you get a grant. We want the network to benefit from this, right? And we want everyone that's going to be providing value to this network to have an opportunity to build on this network.
That might be interesting too. I mean, you think about I consistently keep going back to the community engagement aspect, and like the alpaca metagraph and all that other stuff, like where as you have more projects coming on board or looking to come on board, like you said, vetting is obviously important. I think a lot of the times, like I alluded to, we see decisions that are kind of made without any sort of input and things like that. And, you know, how many projects are around with a lot of these kind of grant aspects that end up happening in different ecosystems. And I think it is important to kind of have that ground level of community that's there and that can call bullshit in certain regards, or that can support in certain regards.
And you're exactly right. And I think that's one of the you know, main, and I know Ben has told me, you know, several times, you know, that's one of the things that he really appreciates about me is, you know, I don't just you know, kowtow and drink Kool-Aid all day, right? I'm not afraid to call things out, right? Like if something isn't right in Denmark, I'm going to be like, hey, look, you know, this probably is not a good idea. And you know, that's how we get better, though, right? I think it was a couple of weeks ago I made a post about it. I don't remember I think it was the Netflix CEO. I think it was him. And somebody was asking him how he was able to elevate everything. And it was because he listened to all the doubters, right? Because, you know, a lot of these people have legitimate reasons. You don't want to shut anybody out. You want to listen to everybody. That's the thing. You don't really just want to surround yourself with yes people. That's not how you're going to succeed.
Yep. 100%, dude. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour, so walk us out with any. You know, I do these things like some of the stuff on autopilot, so I would love to hear any forward-looking statements that you have. What are you excited about moving forward? There's probably a lot there, but yeah.
So I guess moving out, this space on July 1st is going to be great. We have an incredible lineup. You know, I really recommend everybody tuning into that space. It'll be good for not only the community who's already deeply invested in Constellation and knows everything about it, but it'll also be good for people who are just now starting to discover Constellation. And then the other thing that's just right around the corner is that hackathon. I mean, that hackathon is going to level up this whole network like people don't really fully understand. I mean, we can't really talk about, you know, some of the sponsors here, but, you know, this is some big people are sponsoring this hackathon. I mean, that's all I'll say.
Well, I have to. I'm curious if people enjoyed this one because it's a little bit early for everybody. I feel like there was a ton of really good discussions here in this, and at the end of the day, I would love to do more of these. I know that you asked me about the one on July 1st. I'm going to try to make it. I suggest everybody go in there and support Dagnum as he kind of does his first kickoff space within Stardust. I will do my damnedest to make it. If I don't make that one, though, we'll be doing something like this again. Maybe it is an early morning one again. I appreciate you joining us so early. And yeah, looking forward to seeing all the initiatives that you're driving forward within the Stardust Collective and the Constellation ecosystem, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And I will definitely be back on this. We should make this like a thing.
100%.
You know, like maybe like a weekly or bi-weekly or something. But yeah, this was good.
It's going to be called Constellation and Caffeine, and it's going to be at 7 a.m.
Yeah, that's good, man. I love it. Yeah, and I've got my actually I have an Intrana cup. We can have our Intrana cups together.
We can do our coffee together in the morning. So
yeah,
appreciate it, man, as always, and good luck with everything. And to the audience there, we will see you guys next time. Hang out with me for a second, Dagnum, so I make sure the stream ends correctly.
Okay. All right. Take it easy, everybody.